calling clear skies, meaning the Israelis are not operating their drones and their surveillance. Can you explain that, why that is, and
Good
whether,
morning, friends.
to the
Stephen
best of your
Benoit here
knowledge,
with
it is
Israeli
happening
News
right now?
Live. I wanted to be able to run this stream a little bit live for you right now.
Yes, as I told you in the first question, that these issues considered to be very secretive, as Hamas wants the Israeli drones on all surveillance methods and vehicles, which consider to be manned or unmanned aerial vehicles,
Hamas
to be
specifically there.
with the drone from the
There are
sky,
50 Israelis being released and 150 Palestinian prisoners being released. That is going on as of right now. So I'm going to let this play for you a little bit on Al Jazeera. They're covering this live, and just so you can kind of follow the details of this. Hamas has been very secretive on their end for fear of retaliation by Israel. So we'll just have to wait to see how this unfolds. So far, everything it's been delayed quite frequently, but everything is supposed to be in place now at the Rafah crossing on the Egyptian border. Israel has, I believe it's either 3 or 4 helicopters standing by, and the prisoners of the Palestinian prisoners have already been removed from the jails and are headed to a particular facility in near the West Bank there, where they will be released back into their families. The Israelis are saying that the Palestinians are not allowed to celebrate the release of their families, which is just another dictatorial method of the Israeli government to dictate what people can and cannot do. Certainly, it is very sad of that to begin with. So let's go here to Al Jazeera, listen to them live as they cover the story.
Held by Hamas and transferred to the Red Cross, then to Egypt, then back home to Israel. So we're obviously keeping a very, very close eye on any development there. Let's get the view from occupied East Jerusalem. Rory Challens is there. Rory, can you explain to us a little bit on your side how the mechanics of how this is supposed to work? The mediator, Qatar, explained that on their end they have this operations room that's being run, we assume, out of Doha here, where they're in communications with all sides. What do you know on your end?
Yeah, I mean, the mechanics of the captives' release are, as far as we understand it, as follows. This is a process that is going on as we speak. Remember that those captives are supposed to have been making their way to the Rafah crossing in the last 15 minutes or so. That is the way that this passage is going to go. So the captives are being given to the Red Cross. The Red Cross is taking them across the border at Rafah into Egypt. In Egypt, there are 4 Israeli helicopters.
One of the things that we will do is I'm going to let this play live for you guys for a period of time here, and then
some granular detail of that helicopter flight. There have been noise-cancelling headphones provided for
and
the
then
children
what we will do is I will come back just as soon as we get this. Once we get the actual images of what's going on coming out, I'm able to hear it. I will join right back with you here. Got a lot of things going on here this morning, so
they're going to be going to hospitals, 6 different hospitals, most of those in the Tel Aviv area, we understand, and in those hospitals they are going to have their reunification with families and loved ones. That is a process that we expect to be repeated every day over the 4 days of this agreed deal, with lists of the captives to be released published to the Israelis the night before the captives themselves are released. What happens after that, we don't know. There is a possibility that the ceasefire is going to be extended. The Israelis are dangling a carrot for Hamas and basically saying, for every 10 captives that you release, you can get an extra day of ceasefire. Now, how many days of ceasefire will we get from that? We don't know. Rough back of an envelope calculation, there are 50 captives included in this deal. There are 190 captives remaining that we understand. Now, we can write off some of those because they are soldiers, and we don't think that Hamas would release soldiers as part of any deal as it currently stands. There are also about 23 Thais, I think, that might be released unilaterally by Hamas. So let's say there are 50 women and children remaining after this first 50. That will give us maybe another 5 days of ceasefire after that. The Israelis have indicated that this ceasefire agreement is temporary. Essentially what they're saying is, we have to go and finish this job. We will go back to war. We can go back to war. That is going to happen once the ceasefires finish. This is only a temporary truce. This war is not over. We are still intent on smashing Hamas.
Rory Challens, with everything we know right now about the mechanics of this deal. Thank you very much, Rory. You're reporting from occupied East Jerusalem. It is 20 minutes past 4 p.m., which was the time when, as of now, we expect we could at any point see movement on the release of captives from Gaza and the release of Palestinian prisoners from inside Israeli jails. Now, Thailand's prime minister, you heard Rory talking about Thai nationals that have been held in Gaza. Thailand's prime minister has confirmed on social media that 12 Thai workers who were taken captive by Hamas have been released. This has happened on the sidelines of the deal that's going to see the release of Israeli captives and Palestinian prisoners released. Bangkok had been holding separate talks to repatriate about 24 Thai nationals taken captive by Hamas from southern Israel on October the 7th. Let's bring in our diplomatic editor, James Bays. James, a lot of moving parts right now. I'm just finding out about the Thai nationals being released. This is, I suppose this is consistent to some extent with what we've known about these negotiations, there are these negotiations between Hamas, the main ones, Hamas, Israel, mediated by Qatar between Hamas and Israel, but there are also bilateral negotiations, apparently, between Hamas and other countries whose nationals they're holding.
Yeah, the Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesman, when he was giving the details about 24 hours ago of the main deal, said this is just a deal involving Israeli captives and potentially Israeli dual nationals on one side and Palestinian prisoners on the other. But we know that there are other nationals involved, and we know that there were these 23 Thais who were taken captive back on October the 7th. Now, what were these Thai nationals doing in southern Israel? They were agricultural workers, and Thailand had been very strongly making the case that they are not part of the conflict that is going on. They just happen to be in the area. They are not rich people. They were doing a pretty lowly job there in southern Israel. They're not parties to this conflict, and they should be released. And what is interesting is Thailand's been trying to get as much support as it can for their release, and it's been speaking to a country that it has reasonably good relations with, which is Iran. And Iran has been doing, we believe, mediation on behalf of Thailand for these nationals. Also worth, given that the Qatari channel is the main channel of communication to Hamas, worth telling you that the Iranian foreign minister was here in Doha in the last few hours. So I think significant. We're all waiting for the Israeli captives that are part of this formal deal, but that's going to involve 13 people, we think. We've already got 12 people, 12 Thai nationals released, now confirmed by the Thai Prime Minister. This is 12 out of 23. Of course, we don't know how many of those 23 are still alive and whether any of the Thai nationals died in the 47 days of Israeli bombardment of Gaza.
One really simple thing lesson from this latest news that 12 Thai workers have actually been released is that this is somehow working. There is a mechanism. We've been talking about the mechanics of the deal. We've been explaining to our viewers that this is quite complicated, that there needs to be trust between these two sides, Israel and Hamas. Clearly, Hamas has found a way.
One thing I'll share with you guys as well that's been reported earlier on in this whole deal. There was a Bedouin family that was taken captive as well during this hostage taken. There were 3 children, including a 17-year-old daughter, by the Bedouin family. Now, Bedouins are, they could be Muslim depending on their faith. I don't know about that. But nonetheless, they're not even being considered in the hostage exchanges. Not in the first round, not even in the second round, according to Israeli authorities. And that was very troubling because, again, it just shows the clear bias that Israel has and who they're willing to negotiate releases for. So because they're not Jewish, they are not considered in any of the rounds until Israeli hostages are released. Now the Hamas will not release military hostages until the final exchange, because with that they are demanding a much higher, much greater number of releases for those. So just have to wait to see here what's happening and what's going on. You're seeing both sides here. You see the Israeli on the left here as they're ready, waiting for the hostages to come in, and on the right-hand side there, in this image here that I just clicked on, well, I didn't click on, I guess they do it themselves. These are the Palestinians that are waiting for the hostages that have been in Israeli prisons. I call it hostages on both sides because, let's face it, the only ones that are being released from these jails here are women and children. There's approximately 180 children, minors, in Israeli prisons because they threw a rock. They do not get any kind of fair trials whatsoever. They're military tribunals for children that is, with no representation except for whatever Israel decides they get for representation. Families cannot visit these kids very easily because they move them to prisons on the inside of Israeli side, and so therefore the access for them to get permits becomes extremely difficult. So it's very, very sad situation what they go through. And of course, I know years ago when I was very pro-Zionist, I would always argue that, well, I would argue that they're terrorists. They're throwing rocks. They're causing problems for the Israeli people, not realizing at the time the oppression that they were going through on a daily basis. It's no wonder. I mean, look, little children are just, when it comes to when they see constant attacks and bombardments on their family, by a military power, yes, they're going to get angry. It kind of reminds me of my father-in-law, Stefan Suto. He said one time, I asked him about World War II, and in that time period of his life, of course, he was a little boy at the time when this all broke out, but his father was taken by Stalin to Siberia and never seen again. And he was so angry as a little boy. He said he wanted to take a sack of beans and go beat up those soldiers that came and took his father. That's the reaction of children. They're harmed by people that are bigger and stronger than they are, and they don't have any other means. They pick up a rock and throw it. I mean, I remember as a little boy, I had a little bad habit of throwing rocks at cars as well, and it wasn't because anybody was doing harm to us. We just did it for fun, and got in trouble for it, and that ended my days of rock throwing at cars. But the thing is that in the case of these Palestinian children, the oppression that has gone on for 75 years has just been absolutely horrendous. And I know it firsthand from living there. I've seen it. I've seen what happens to Palestinians, but we never think about what they go through, why they react the way they do. Even in the case with this war in Gaza, there is now 6,150 children that have been confirmed to have died in this siege that Israel has done with their war, quote unquote, on Hamas. We don't hear any numbers of Hamas fighters that have died, and there's still over 7,000 people missing, over 7,000 buried in the rubble. We know that with it being proportionately displaced, a total of, I think it's like 14,000 something altogether that they have confirmed dead. Like I said, 6,000 of those are children, 4,000 are women. So if you take that number right there, only 4,000 are men. So 10,000 of the dead are women and children. If 4,000 are men, how many of those are just civilians? And look at the mass graves. I mean, it is a humanitarian catastrophe, a genocide of beyond anything I've ever seen. I can't encourage you enough to go and look at, not the last video I did, but the one before that, where I take rabbis from Israel, France, Russia, all of them talking about they're going to bring about a third world war because they're paying back the Christians for all the crimes against the Jews, not just the Christians, but also the Arabic people, for crimes, as they say, they claim that they're reincarnated today, and that's what Israel's claim is that they have to pay them back for the crimes that they did to the Jewish people thousands of years ago in some cases. Like in the case of Gaza, they believe they're paying them back for the crimes of the Philistines. Just like in the case of Armenia. They're paying Armenia back through Azerbaijan because there were 3,000 Jews that were killed, along with about 30-something thousand Arabs that were killed as well by the Armenians. So now they're paying them back. Let me see real quick what Gideon Levy is saying here.
The same intensity, because if it continues in the same intensity, it means
Israeli
moving
journalist.
down to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, where 2 million people are now concentrated on a very small piece of land. I don't want to imagine myself what bloodbath can take place there.
Humanitarian aid, including fuel and a convoy of ambulances, is flowing into Gaza from Egypt. Hamas says about 200 trucks are expected to enter the Strip for each day the ceasefire holds. Mike Lappel, Al Jazeera.
We can now report that Israeli hostages in Gaza have been transferred to the Red Cross and are currently on their way to the border crossing with Egypt, the Rafah border crossing. This is coming from Reuters news agency, which is citing Israeli TV channels. So I'll repeat that. Israeli captives in Gaza have been transferred to the Red Cross, and they're currently, as we speak, on their way to the border crossing with Egypt. So this is in line with how the deal was supposed to work. 13 Israeli captives that have been held in Gaza by Hamas since October the 7th were scheduled to be released sometime after 4 p.m. It's currently 4:30, and the Red Cross was meant to be facilitating this, get them out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. That's the